In the heart of Vatican City, where ancient stone pathways whispered stories of centuries past, Pope Leo XIV sat in his modest office. The room was quiet except for the soft rustle of papers and the occasional chirping of birds outside his window. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the wooden floor. It was a peaceful morning, just like any other, until a letter arrived that would change everything. The envelope stood out among the stack of documents, waiting for the Pope's attention. Its simplicity caught his eye. No grand insignia or flashy design, just plain white paper with neat handwriting. Curious, Pope Leo XIV picked it up and turned it over. There was no return address, only a postmark from Los Angeles. He carefully opened the envelope, unfolded the single sheet of paper inside, and began to read. As he scanned the lines, his brow furrowed slightly, then relaxed into a thoughtful expression. The letter was signed by none other than Keanu Reeves, the actor famous not just for his roles in blockbuster movies, but also for his humility and kindness off-screen. What made this correspondence even more surprising was its content. Instead of discussing fame or entertainment, Keanu had written about something much deeper: humanity's struggles. Keanu's words painted a vivid picture of a world grappling with challenges both visible and invisible. He spoke of poverty-stricken families, living without basic necessities, of forests being cut down at alarming rates, and of communities torn apart by injustice and division. Yet despite these heavy topics, his tone remained hopeful. He expressed a desire to understand how people could come together to heal these wounds, not just as nations or governments, but as individuals united by shared values. Pope Leo XIV leaned back in his chair, holding the letter gently between his fingers. His mind wandered as he considered the weight of Keanu's questions. Here was a man known worldwide for playing heroes on screen, yet he was seeking guidance on becoming a hero in real life. The sincerity in his words struck a chord deep within the Pope. It wasn't often that someone so influential reached out with such vulnerability, asking not for blessings or favors, but for wisdom. The Pope rose from his desk and walked to the large window overlooking St. Peter's Square. Below him, pilgrims gathered, their voices blending into a hum of devotion. Tourists snapped photos, children chased pigeons, and priests moved quietly among the crowd. Watching them, Pope Leo XIV felt a renewed sense of responsibility. This letter wasn't just addressed to him. It represented the hopes and fears of countless others who might never have the courage to write such a message themselves. For the rest of the day, the Pope couldn't stop thinking about Keanu's plea. During meetings with advisors, while praying, in the chapel, and even during meals, snippets of the letter replayed in his mind. How can we bring truth to a world clouded by misinformation? Keanu had asked. What does justice look like when power is so unevenly distributed? These weren't easy questions to answer, but they were essential ones. That evening, after most of the Vatican staff had retired for the night, Pope Leo XIV returned to his office. He lit a small lamp on his desk and placed Keanu's letter in front of him. Slowly, he picked up a pen and began jotting down notes. Ideas flowed freely, some practical, others philosophical. He wrote about the importance of listening to those who suffer, of standing up against oppression, and of finding strength in unity. Each word carried the weight of years spent studying faith, history, and human nature. As he worked, the Pope found himself imagining what Keanu must be like in person. Was he as humble as he seemed in interviews? Did he truly believe in the causes he championed? Or was this simply a fleeting interest? These thoughts didn't diminish the significance of the letter. Instead, they fueled the Pope's determination to respond with authenticity and care. After all, if someone as prominent as Keanu Reeves was willing to ask tough questions, shouldn't the world take notice? By the time dawn broke over Rome, Pope Leo XIV had drafted the beginnings of a response. It wasn't polished yet, but it contained the seeds of an idea, an invitation to collaborate, to bridge divides, and to inspire action. Little did he know that this simple exchange would set off a chain reaction, touching lives far beyond the walls of the Vatican. And so, What started as an ordinary day in the life of Pope Leo XIV became the beginning of an extraordinary journey. One that would connect two vastly different worlds and ignite a global conversation about truth, justice, and reconciliation. The morning after receiving Keanu Reeves's heartfelt letter, Pope Leo XIV found himself unable to shake the thoughts swirling in his mind. As he strolled through the Vatican gardens, surrounded by lush greenery and the soothing sound of fountains, he reflected deeply on the actor's words. The gardens were a place of solace for him, where he often sought clarity amidst life's complexities. Today, however, the questions posed by Keanu felt heavier than usual. They weren't just abstract concepts. They were urgent calls to action, cries from a world yearning for direction. Pope Leo XIV paused near a marble statue of Saint Francis of Assisi, a figure renowned for his love of nature and devotion to serving others. He gazed at the serene expression on the saint's face and wondered how Saint Francis might respond if he were alive today. Would he speak softly, urging humanity to embrace compassion? Or would he raise his voice against the injustices plaguing the modern world? These musings inspired the Pope to think about his own role. How could he craft a response that honored both tradition and the pressing needs of the present? Returning to his office, the Pope sat down with a fresh sheet of paper. Before putting pen to paper, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Writing this letter wasn't merely an obligation. It was an opportunity. A chance to connect not only with Keanu but also with everyone who shared his concerns. The Pope knew that while Keanu's fame had brought attention to these issues, countless others around the world felt the same sense of helplessness. His words needed to resonate with them too. He began by addressing Keanu directly, thanking him for his courage in reaching out. "Dear Mr. Reeves," he wrote, "your letter has touched my heart. In a time when many voices are raised in discord, yours stands apart, not because of your status, but because of your sincerity." This opening line set the tone for the rest of the message, respectful, personal, and filled with warmth. Next, the Pope turned his focus to the core themes of Keanu's inquiry: truth, justice, and reconciliation. Truth, he explained, was not something static or absolute. It was a journey, a pursuit that required humility and openness. Truth is not always easy to find, he wrote, but it begins with honesty, with looking inward and acknowledging our flaws as well as our strengths. He encouraged Keanu, and by extension anyone reading the letter, to seek truth not just in grand gestures but in small, everyday actions. A kind word spoken to a stranger, a willingness to listen without judgment, or even admitting when one is wrong. All of these were steps toward uncovering what was real and meaningful. When it came to justice, Pope Leo XIV chose his words carefully. Justice, he believed, wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about restoration. True justice, he penned, is rooted in love. It asks us to see the dignity in every person, no matter their circumstances. He acknowledged the challenges facing society, inequality, corruption, environmental destruction, but insisted that despair was not the answer. Instead, he urged people to act as peacemakers, to stand up for those who couldn't stand for themselves, and to work tirelessly for fairness and equity. Reconciliation, the final piece of Keanu's triad, proved to be the most delicate topic. The Pope recognized that healing divisions, whether between individuals, communities, or nations, was never simple. Yet, he firmly believed it was possible. Reconciliation requires patience, he wrote. It demands that we let go of grudges, forgive those who have wronged us, and extend a hand of friendship to those we may consider enemies. Drawing on biblical teachings, he reminded readers of the power of forgiveness, citing examples like Jesus forgiving his persecutors and Nelson Mandela embracing his former captors. These stories, he argued, showed that reconciliation wasn't a sign of weakness but of immense strength. Throughout the letter, Pope Leo XIV wove in anecdotes from his own experiences. He recalled visiting refugee camps and seeing the resilience of families displaced by war. He described meeting young activists fighting for climate justice and being moved by their determination. By sharing these moments, he hoped to make his message relatable and grounded. He wanted Keanu, and anyone else reading the letter, to feel that they weren't alone in their struggles. There were millions of others striving for change, each contributing in their own way. As the hours passed, the Pope's desk became cluttered with drafts and notes. Some sentences were rewritten multiple times until they conveyed exactly what he intended. Others flowed effortlessly, as if guided by a higher power. Despite the effort involved, the process felt fulfilling. Each word brought him closer to articulating a vision of hope, one that transcended differences and united people under a common purpose. Finally, as twilight settled over Rome, casting long shadows across the Vatican walls, Pope Leon XIV reached the conclusion of his letter. He ended with an invitation both literal and symbolic. Let us join hands, you and I, not as celebrities or leaders, but as humble servants of humanity. Together we can plant seeds of change that will grow into forests of peace. He signed off simply. With prayers and blessings, Pope Leo XIII. Exhausted yet satisfied, the Pope folded the letter and placed it in an envelope. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine Keanu's reaction upon receiving it. Would the actor be pleased, inspired, perhaps even surprised? Whatever the outcome, the Pope felt confident that he had done his best to honor the spirit of Keanu's inquiry. Little did he know, this letter would spark something far greater than either of them could have anticipated. It wasn't just a response. It was a catalyst, a ripple that would soon become a wave. And as the Pope retired to his quarters that night, he couldn't help but feel a quiet excitement about what lay ahead. When Keanu Reeves received the envelope bearing the Vatican's seal, he was sitting in his modest Los Angeles home. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of traffic outside. Keanu had just finished a morning workout, a routine that helped him stay grounded, and was sipping a cup of tea when the letter arrived. It wasn't often that something from the Vatican landed on his doorstep, and his curiosity quickly turned into anticipation as he carefully opened it. As he read Pope Leo XIV's words, a sense of calm washed over him. The response was everything he had hoped for: thoughtful, compassionate, and deeply inspiring. Keanu found himself nodding along as he absorbed each sentence. The Pope's reflections on truth, justice, and reconciliation resonated with him on a personal level. He felt understood, as if the spiritual leader had reached across continents to offer not just answers, but also encouragement. By the time he reached the final lines, Keanu knew this message needed to be shared with the world. At first he hesitated. Sharing such a private exchange might seem unusual, even intrusive. But the more he thought about it, the clearer it became that this wasn't just a conversation between two individuals. It was a dialogue meant for everyone. The themes the Pope had addressed were universal, touching on issues that affected people regardless of their background or beliefs. With permission from the Vatican, Keanu decided to reveal both letters during an upcoming interview. He hoped that by doing so, he could amplify their impact and inspire others to take action. The day of the interview arrived, and Keanu appeared on a popular late-night talk show. Dressed casually in his signature understated style, he carried himself with the same humility that had endeared him to fans worldwide. When the host asked about his latest projects, Keanu surprised everyone by pulling out the letters. "I want to share something special tonight," he said, holding them up. The audience leaned forward, intrigued. For the next few minutes, Keanu read excerpts from both his original letter and the Pope's response. His voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the emotion behind his words. As the camera panned to the audience, it was clear that Keanu's decision to share the correspondence had struck a chord. People listened intently, some nodding along while others wiped away tears. Social media erupted almost instantly. Clips of the segment went viral, sparking conversations across platforms. Memes began circulating, playful yet respectful tributes to the unlikely pairing of a Hollywood star and a religious leader. Hashtags like "Value Truth and Justice" and "Our Pope and Keanu" trended globally, uniting people from different walks of life in a shared moment of reflection. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. Inspired by the exchange, communities around the world started organizing events aimed at addressing the very issues Keanu and the Pope had discussed. In New York City, volunteers gathered to clean up parks and plant trees, echoing the Pope's call to care for the environment. In Mumbai, a group of young activists launched a campaign to provide meals and education to underprivileged children, inspired by Keanu's emphasis on compassion. Even in small towns, people came together to host discussions about how they could make a difference locally. Schools and universities joined the movement too. Teachers incorporated lessons about empathy and ethics into their curriculums, using the letters as teaching tools. Students wrote essays and created art projects exploring the themes of truth, justice, and reconciliation. One high school in Chicago organized a Day of Kindness, where students performed random acts of generosity for strangers. A college in London held a panel discussion featuring experts on climate change, social justice, and interfaith cooperation, all inspired by the principles outlined in the letters. Religious leaders from various faiths also took notice. Imams, rabbis, pastors, and monks praised the collaboration between Keanu and Pope Leo XIV, seeing it as a powerful example of unity and diversity. Interfaith dialogues sprang up in cities across the globe, bringing together people who might otherwise never have interacted. These gatherings weren't just about discussing theology, they focused on practical ways to address societal challenges. Participants left feeling hopeful, armed with new ideas and connections. Even businesses got involved. Companies large and small pledged to adopt more ethical practices, from reducing carbon footprints to ensuring fair wages for employees. A tech startup in Silicon Valley launched an app designed to connect volunteers with local causes, inspired by the grassroots efforts sparked by the letters. Meanwhile, a fashion brand donated a portion of its profits to organizations fighting poverty, citing the Pope's reminder that justice begins with love. For Keanu, watching this ripple effect unfold was humbling. He hadn't anticipated the scale of the response, nor had he expected to become a central figure in a global movement. Yet, he embraced the role gracefully, using his platform to keep the momentum going. During interviews and public appearances, he encouraged people to focus on what they could do no matter how small. "Change starts with us," he often said. "It's not about waiting for someone else to fix things. It's about stepping up and doing our part." Meanwhile, Pope Leo XIV watched the unfolding events with quiet pride. From his office in the Vatican, he followed news reports and social media updates, marveling at how a single letter had ignited such widespread action. He saw it as proof that humanity still possessed an innate desire to connect, to heal, and to grow. Though he remained humble about his role, he couldn't deny the significance of what was happening. This wasn't just about him or Keanu. It was about the power of sincere communication to transcend boundaries and inspire collective action. As weeks turned into months, the impact continued to grow. What had begun as a private exchange between two individuals had evolved into a global phenomenon. People who had never met Keanu or the Pope felt personally connected to their story. They saw themselves in the questions Keanu had asked and found hope in the answers the Pope had provided. Conversations that might have seemed daunting or abstract suddenly felt accessible and actionable. By the end of the year, the letters had been translated into dozens of languages and shared in classrooms, community centers, and places of worship around the world. They became symbols of possibility, a testament to the idea that even in uncertain times, meaningful change was within reach. And though neither Keanu nor Pope Leo XIV sought recognition for their roles, their names became synonymous with a movement that reminded humanity of its potential for good. In the midst of all this, one thing was clear. The bond between these two unlikely allies had sparked something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Their simple act of reaching out had set off a chain reaction, proving that when hearts and minds align, anything is possible. Months had passed since the letters between Keanu Reeves and Pope Leo XIV captured the world's attention. The global response had been overwhelming, with people from all corners of the earth drawing inspiration from their exchange. Yet despite the widespread impact, Both men felt there was still more to be done. For Keanu, the experience had deepened his resolve to contribute meaningfully to the causes he cared about. For Pope Leo XIV, it reinforced his belief in the power of collaboration across boundaries. It was this shared commitment that led to an idea neither of them could ignore: a meeting in person. The planning for such a meeting was no small feat. Coordinating schedules between a Hollywood actor and the leader of the Catholic Church required careful timing and discretion. Eventually, a date was set, and Keanu traveled to Rome, eager yet nervous about the encounter. As his plane descended into the bustling city, he looked out the window at the ancient architecture and vibrant streets below. He couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and humility. This wasn't just another trip. It was a chance to connect with someone who had touched his soul through words alone. On the day of the meeting, Keanu arrived at the Vatican early in the morning. Dressed simply in a dark suit and tie, he walked through the grand halls of the Apostolic Palace, escorted by a member of the Swiss Guard. The air was cool and carried the faint scent of incense, a reminder of centuries of tradition. Despite the opulence surrounding him, Keanu felt surprisingly at ease. There was something grounding about being in a place so steeped in history and spirituality. Finally, he was ushered into a modestly decorated room where Pope Leo XIV awaited him. The Pope stood near a large wooden table, smiling warmly as Keanu entered. "Welcome, my friend," he said, extending his hand. Keanu shook it firmly, feeling an immediate sense of kinship. They exchanged pleasantries before sitting down to talk, their conversation flowing effortlessly from the start. What followed was a deeply personal and candid discussion. They spoke about their lives, Keanu sharing stories of his childhood, his struggles with loss, and his journey in Hollywood, while the Pope recounted moments from his own path to priesthood. Both men found common ground in their experiences of hardship and resilience. At one point, Keanu laughed heartily as the Pope joked about the challenges of navigating modern technology, admitting that even spiritual leaders weren't immune to the occasional smartphone mishap. These lighter moments balanced the heavier topics they tackled, creating an atmosphere of genuine connection. As the hours passed, their conversation shifted to the issues that had sparked their correspondence. They delved into the complexities of poverty, climate change, and social inequality, discussing potential solutions and strategies for action. Keanu listened intently as the Pope emphasized the importance of grassroots efforts, explaining how lasting change often began at the local level. In turn, Keanu shared insights from his work with charitable organizations, highlighting the value of storytelling in raising awareness and inspiring empathy. By the end of their meeting, both men felt invigorated. Their shared vision for a better world had grown clearer, and they decided to take their collaboration a step further. Together, they announced the launch of the Truth and Justice Initiative, a platform designed to unite diverse groups in addressing pressing global challenges. The initiative would focus on three key areas: education, environmental sustainability, and community empowerment. Its goal was not only to raise funds and resources, but also to foster dialogue and cooperation among individuals and organizations, working towards similar goals. Later that afternoon, Keanu and Pope Leo XIV addressed a small gathering of activists, artists, and religious leaders in a courtyard within the Vatican grounds. The audience sat in rapt attention as the two men took turns speaking. Keanu began by expressing gratitude for the opportunity to meet the Pope and for the incredible response their letters had generated. "This isn't about us," he said, earnestly. "It's about what we can do together. Every act of kindness matters, no matter how small." When it was the Pope's turn to speak, he echoed Keanu's sentiments. "We are all called to be builders of peace," he declared. "Let us not wait for others to lead the way. Let us roll up our sleeves and get to work." His voice carried a quiet authority that resonated deeply with those present. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The announcement of the Truth and Justice Initiative sent waves of excitement through the crowd. Attendees eagerly discussed ways they could contribute, whether through volunteering, fundraising, or spreading awareness. Social media lit up once again as news of the initiative spread, with people around the world pledging their support. Within days partnerships began forming between NGOs, universities, and corporations, all eager to align themselves with the movement. Back home, Keanu reflected on the day's events with a mixture of awe and determination. Meeting the Pope had exceeded his expectations, not because of any grand gestures but because of the profound humanity he had encountered. Pope Leo XIII, too, felt renewed by the experience. Watching Keanu interact with others, with kindness, humility, and authenticity, reinforced his belief in the goodness inherent in people. In the weeks that followed, the Truth and Justice Initiative gained momentum. Schools adopted programs focused on teaching students about empathy and ethical decision-making. Cities implemented policies aimed at reducing homelessness and improving access to education. Environmental campaigns inspired individuals to adopt sustainable practices from planting trees to reducing plastic use. Art installations, films, and music projects emerged, using creative expression to highlight social issues and inspire action. Perhaps most importantly, the initiative fostered a spirit of unity. People who might never have crossed paths, activists, and business owners, clergy, and scientists, found themselves working side by side. Differences in background or belief no longer seemed insurmountable. Instead, they became opportunities for learning and growth. The collaboration between Keanu and Pope Leo XIV had shown that when people come together with a shared purpose, barriers fall away. For both men, the success of the initiative was a testament to the power of sincerity and collaboration. Neither had sought fame or recognition. They had simply followed their hearts. And in doing so, they had reminded the world of something essential, that hope is contagious and that even in the face of daunting challenges, humanity has the capacity to rise above. As the sun set over Vatican City on the day of their meeting, casting golden light over St. Peter's Basilica, Keanu and Pope Leo XIV stood together, watching the horizon. Neither spoke, but the silence between them was filled with unspoken understanding. They knew their work was far from over, but they also knew they had taken a significant step forward. Together they had planted seeds of change, and now it was up to the world to nurture them. Years had passed since the historic meeting between Keanu Reeves and Pope Leo XIV, but the impact of their collaboration continued to ripple across the globe. What had started as a simple exchange of letters had grown into a movement that transcended borders, cultures, and beliefs. The Truth and Justice Initiative, born from their shared vision, became a beacon of hope in a world often clouded by division and despair. It wasn't just about grand gestures or sweeping policy changes. It was about the countless small acts of kindness and courage inspired by their partnership. In the years following their meeting, communities around the world embraced the initiative's core values: truth, justice, and reconciliation. Schools incorporated lessons on empathy and ethics into their curriculums, teaching children not only how to solve math problems, but also how to stand up for what is right. In one small town in Brazil, students organized a kindness week, where they performed good deeds for strangers and documented their experiences in journals. Their teacher later shared these stories online, inspiring similar efforts in classrooms across continents. These young voices proved that even the smallest actions, a smile, a helping hand, a listening ear, could create waves of positivity. Cities also began implementing programs aimed at addressing systemic issues like homelessness and inequality. In Los Angeles, a city infamous for its sprawling tent encampments, local leaders partnered with community organizations to build affordable housing and provide job training for those in need. A mural painted on the side of a newly constructed shelter depicted Keanu shaking hands with Pope Leo XIV, symbolizing unity and compassion. Passers-by often stopped to take photos, struck by the image's message of solidarity. Similar projects sprouted in urban centers worldwide, each tailored to the unique challenges faced by its residents. Environmental sustainability became another cornerstone of the initiative's success. Inspired by Pope Leo XIII's call to care for creation, individuals and businesses alike adopted greener practices. Farmers in Kenya learned sustainable farming techniques through workshops funded by the initiative, allowing them to grow crops without depleting the soil. Meanwhile, tech companies in Silicon Valley developed innovative solutions to reduce waste, such as biodegradable packaging and energy-efficient devices. Even households joined the effort, planting trees, reducing plastic use, and conserving water. Social media campaigns encouraged people to share their eco-friendly habits, creating a sense of global camaraderie. The arts played a pivotal role in spreading the initiative's message. Filmmakers produced documentaries highlighting stories of resilience and transformation, while musicians composed songs celebrating unity and hope. One particularly moving piece, written by a Grammy-winning artist, featured lyrics inspired by Pope Leo XIV's words, "Let us be builders of bridges, not walls." The song topped charts worldwide, becoming an anthem for activists and dreamers alike. Visual artists contributed murals, sculptures, and installations that turned public spaces into galleries of inspiration. Each work carried a reminder that art has the power to heal and unite. Religious and interfaith groups found common ground through the initiative, organizing events that brought together people of different beliefs. In Jerusalem, a city historically marked by conflict, leaders from Judaism, Christianity, and Islam gathered for a day of peace. They planted olive trees, a symbol of harmony, and pledged to work together to address poverty and promote education. Similar gatherings took place in cities like Delhi, Istanbul, and Cape Town, fostering dialogue and understanding. These moments proved that faith could be a unifying force rather than a source of division. For Keanu Reeves, the journey had transformed him in ways he never expected. While he remained humble and private, his involvement in the initiative gave him a platform to champion causes close to his heart. He continued to support charitable organizations, visiting shelters and hospitals, to offer encouragement to those struggling. Fans affectionately dubbed him the accidental activist, though Keanu himself saw nothing accidental about it. "We all have a responsibility to help each other," he often said during interviews. "It's not about being famous, it's about being human." Pope Leo XIV, now retired, reflected on the experience with quiet pride. Though he no longer held the title of Pope, his legacy lived on through the countless lives touched by the initiative. People still wrote to him, sharing how his words had inspired them to make a difference. One letter came from a young woman in Uganda who had started a literacy program in her village after reading about the importance of education. Another was from a man in Norway who had quit his corporate job to dedicate himself to environmental conservation. These stories reminded him that leadership wasn't about titles or positions. It was about planting seeds of change and trusting others to nurture them. As time went on, the bond between Keanu and Pope Leo XIV endured, though they rarely saw each other in person. They exchanged occasional letters, updating one another on new developments and expressing gratitude for the unexpected friendship they had formed. Both men understood that their partnership had been a rare gift, one that had allowed them to transcend their individual roles and connect as equals. Decades later, historians would look back on this period as a turning point in modern history. The unlikely alliance between a Hollywood actor and a spiritual leader had sparked a global awakening, reminding humanity of its capacity for compassion and cooperation. Textbooks featured side-by-side images of Keanu and Pope Leo XIV, accompanied by captions describing their contributions to social justice and environmental stewardship. Museums displayed artifacts from the era, the original letters, photographs of their meeting, and replicas of the murals inspired by their work. Yet, perhaps the most enduring legacy of their partnership was the idea that anyone could make a difference. Whether you were a celebrity, a religious leader, or simply someone trying to navigate life's challenges, your actions mattered. The story of Keanu and Pope Leo XIV served as a testament to the power of sincerity, humility, and collaboration. It showed that when two people come together with a shared purpose, they can inspire millions to follow suit. On a quiet evening in Rome, long after the headlines had faded, an elderly man sat on a park bench overlooking the Tiber River. His face bore the lines of age, but his eyes sparkled with wisdom. Beside him lay a well-worn book containing the letters that had changed the course of history. As he gazed at the flowing water, he whispered a prayer of thanks for the courage to reach out, for the friendships forged, and for the countless lives transformed by a simple act of connection. Far away in a cozy Los Angeles home, another figure sat by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. Around him were reminders of the journey he'd embarked upon years ago, photographs, awards, and notes from fans. Yet none of these compared to the joy he felt knowing that his small gesture, a letter written in earnest, had ignited a movement that would endure for generations. And so, the story of Keanu Reeves and Pope Leo XIV became more than just a chapter in history books. It became a living legacy, a reminder that truth, justice, and reconciliation are not abstract ideals but tangible goals within reach. Through their unlikely partnership, they had shown the world that even in uncertain times, hope could flourish when hearts and minds aligned. Theirs was a tale of connection, courage, and the boundless potential of humanity to rise above.